Commander Vexstar sat alone in the dark corner of the old cantina, her forearms wrapped around a hot cup of bitter drink. The metal parts that replaced her lost limbs made soft clicking sounds as she moved. She wanted to drink in peace, but the young soldiers would not leave her alone. "Commander, tell us about the war," said a young alien with bright green scales. His eyes were wide with excitement. "Tell us about fighting the humans." Vexstar looked up with her one good eye. The other eye was gone, replaced by a red metal piece that glowed softly in the dim light. Her face was covered in old scars from many battles. She was tired of talking about the war, but the young ones always wanted to hear the stories. "You really want to know about humans?" she asked. Her voice was rough like broken glass. "Then sit down and listen. But this is not a happy story about brave warriors. This is a warning." The cantina grew quiet. Other aliens at nearby tables turned to listen. Everyone knew Vexstar's stories were true. She had been there. She had seen things that most soldiers only heard about in nightmares. More young soldiers gathered around her table. They pulled up chairs and benches. Their faces showed excitement and fear. Some had never been in a real battle. Others had fought small wars against pirates and rebels. But none had fought humans. 30 years ago, we thought we knew everything about war, Vexstar said. She took a long drink from her cup and made a face. The liquid was bitter, but it helped her remember. "We had big ships, we had powerful weapons. We had won wars against 100 different species across the galaxy." A young soldier with blue skin raised his hand. "But humans were weak, right? They only lived on one small planet." Vexstar laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "That is what we thought too. High Command sent scouts to watch them for many years. The reports all said the same thing. Humans were primitive. They used simple rockets to travel in space. They fought wars with metal bullets and explosive shells. Their technology was hundreds of years behind ours." She paused and looked around the table at all the young faces. "We were so very wrong. The Galactic Council decided humans were too dangerous to leave alone," she continued, "not because they were strong, but because they were growing too fast. In just 50 years, they had gone from flying in the air to landing on their moon. In another 50 years, they were building space stations and sending ships to other planets. In their system, Vexstar's metal fingers drummed against the table. The sound was like rain on a metal roof. The council was afraid. What would humans do in another 100 years? So they decided to stop human growth before it became a real problem. A young female soldier with purple fur spoke up. "That makes sense. It is better to fight a weak enemy than wait for them to become strong." "Yes, that is what we all thought," Vexstar said. "So the council sent the Third Fleet to the human system. 12 of our biggest warships. Each ship could destroy whole cities with one shot. The fleet was commanded by Admiral Kordak, one of our greatest military leaders." She finished her drink and set the empty cup on the table. The humans had maybe 20 small ships defending their space. Tiny things that looked like they were made from scrap metal and hope. "Our ships were each 10 times bigger and 100 times more powerful. So you won, I believe?" asked the blue-skinned soldier. Vexstar shook her head slowly. "That is where the nightmare began. When Admiral Kordak contacted the human fleet and demanded they surrender, we expected them to give up immediately. Any smart species would have looked at our ships and known they could not win." She leaned forward and her red metal eye glowed brighter. "But humans are not like other species. Their leader was a young male named Tejo. He was the captain of their biggest ship, which was still smaller than our smallest escort vessel." The young soldiers leaned in closer. The cantina was so quiet they could hear each other breathing. "Admiral Kordak sent the message on all frequencies so every human could hear," Vexstar said. "He told them they had 1 hour to surrender or we would destroy every ship and space station in their system. He offered to let them keep their planet if they agreed to join the Galactic Council as a servant species." She paused for effect, remembering that day so clearly it felt like yesterday. "Captain Tejo's response was broadcast back to our entire fleet," she said, "for words that changed everything. For words that started the longest and bloodiest war in galactic history." "What did he say?" whispered the purple-furred soldier. Vex smiled, but her smile was cold and frightening. "He said, 'Come and take it.'" The young soldiers looked confused. That seemed like such a simple response. "You do not understand yet," Vexstar said, "but you will." Those 4 words were not just defiance. They were a promise that humans would rather die fighting than live as slaves, and they kept that promise for 7 long years. She stood up slowly, her metal legs creaking. "That is enough for tonight. Tomorrow, if you still want to hear more, I will tell you about the first battle, about how Captain Tejo taught us that humans do not fight like any other species in the galaxy." The young soldiers watched her limp away into the darkness, their excitement replaced by something much deeper and more troubling. The next night, Vexstar returned to the same dark corner of the cantina. The young soldiers were already waiting for her. They had brought more friends this time. Word had spread about her stories, and now 20 alien soldiers sat around her table. Their faces showed fear and excitement as she sat down with her bitter drink. "You came back," she said, looking at all the young faces. "Good. Maybe you will learn something that keeps you alive." A new soldier, one with silver skin and 4 eyes, raised his hand. "Commander, yesterday you said," the human captain told Admiral Kordak to come and take it. "What happened next?" Vexstar took a long drink and set her cup down hard. "What happened next changed how we think about war forever." Admiral Kordak was angry that such a small species dared to refuse him. He decided to teach humans a lesson they would never forget. She looked around the table at all the listening faces. The Admiral ordered all 12 ships to attack at once. It should have been over in minutes. Our weapons were so much better than theirs. Our shields were stronger. Our ships were faster. Every computer model said we would win with 0 losses. "But you didn't win?" asked the purple-furred soldier from the night before. "We didn't even understand what we were fighting," Vexstar said. "When the battle started, Captain Tejo did something that broke every rule of space combat. Instead of trying to run or hide behind their space station, he flew his ship straight at Admiral Kordak's flagship." The young soldiers looked confused. "That sounds like suicide," said one. "That is what we thought too," Vexstar replied. "Our gunners could not believe what they were seeing. A tiny human ship, flying directly into the weapons of our biggest warship. They kept waiting for the humans to turn away or try to dodge. But Captain Tejo never changed course." She paused and touched the scars on her face. "I was on the Admiral's bridge that day. I saw everything. When Captain Tejo's ship got close enough, we could see him through the front window of his bridge. He was smiling." "Smiling?" asked the silver-skinned soldier. "Smiling," Vexter confirmed. "Like he was enjoying himself, like flying into certain death was the most fun he had ever had. That should have been our first warning about humans." She took another drink and continued. "At the last second, we thought Captain Tejo would fire his weapons and try to damage us before we killed him. Instead, he did something none of us expected. He rammed his ship straight into our hull." The young soldiers gasped. Ramming was considered the most desperate and foolish tactic in space warfare. Ships that rammed usually destroyed themselves while doing little damage to their target. "Captain Tejo's ship was much smaller than ours," Vexter said, "but humans build their ships differently than we do. Where we use light materials to make fast ships, humans use heavy metal and thick armor. Captain Tejo's ship punched through our hull like a bullet through paper." She smiled grimly at the memory. "The explosion killed Captain Tejo and his entire crew instantly. But it also destroyed half of our main weapon systems and killed 300 of our warriors. In one attack, a single small human ship had done more damage to us than some entire enemy fleets. But that left the humans with only 19 ships. Against 11 of yours," said a young soldier with green scales. "That is what Admiral Kordak thought too," Vexter said. He was angry and embarrassed that one human ship had damaged his flagship. He ordered the remaining ships to destroy all the human vessels quickly. She leaned forward, her red metal eye glowing in the dim light. "But while we were dealing with the damage from Captain Tejo's attack, the other human ships were moving, not running away like we expected. They were surrounding us." "How could 19 small ships surround 11 large ones?" asked the silver-skinned soldier. "Because humans do not think like we do," Vexstar explained. "We had arranged our ships in a standard battle formation, all close together so we could protect each other. The humans spread out in all directions. They came at us from above, below, and from both sides at the same time." She took another drink, remembering the chaos of that day. "Each human ship attacked a different one of ours, but they did not try to win fair fights. Instead, they used tricks and tactics we had never seen before." "What kind of tricks?" asked the purple-furred soldier. "A human captain named Minho pretended his ship was badly damaged," Vexter said. "He sent a message saying he wanted to surrender. When our ship moved close to capture him, he exploded his own engine core. The explosion destroyed both ships." The young soldiers looked shocked. "He killed himself just to take one of your ships with him." "That was just the beginning," Vexter said. "Another human captain, a female named Haywan, used her ship's cargo bay to launch hundreds of metal containers at us. We thought they were trying to block our sensors. Instead, each container was full of explosives. When they hit our ships, they exploded like bombs." She finished her drink and stood up slowly. "By the end of the first battle, we had lost 4 ships. The humans lost all 20 of theirs. But they had taught us something terrible. They would rather die than surrender. And they were very creative about how to make their deaths hurt us." The cantina was completely silent as Vexter limped away. The young soldiers sat in the darkness, thinking about what they had learned. War with humans was not like war with anyone else. On the third night, even more soldiers came to hear Vexter's stories. The cantina was packed with aliens from different species, all wanting to learn about the human war. Vexter sat in her usual corner, but now she had to speak louder so everyone could hear. "You all came back," she said, looking at the crowd. "Good. Tonight I will tell you how a small problem became the worst war in galactic history." A tall alien, with 6 arms raised one hand. "Commander, after that first battle, Surely the humans knew they could not win. Vexstar laughed, but it was not a happy sound. That is what High Command thought too. They sent messages to Earth asking the humans to surrender. They offered good terms. Humans could keep their planet and govern themselves if they agreed to stop building warships. She took a drink from her cup. The human government sent back a message. It was from their leader, a female named Jihai. She said humans would never surrender while they had breath in their bodies. She promised that every human who died would take 10 of us with them. That sounds like empty words, said a young soldier with blue skin. We thought so too, Vexstar replied. So the council sent more ships, the 5th Fleet, the 7th Fleet, and the 10th Fleet. 60 of our best warships total. Surely humans would see reason when faced with such power. She gestured to her metal arm. I lost this arm in the 2nd year of the war, at the Battle of New Sol Colony. The humans had built a small base on an asteroid near their system. We had cut them off from Earth for 3 months. No supplies, no reinforcements, no communication. The crowd leaned in closer. Our intelligence said the humans were starving. Their leader was a male named Dong Wu, and he had only 5 people with him. We had 5,000 warriors ready to attack. Vexstar touched her metal arm with her remaining organic hand. We expected them to surrender when they saw our ships. Instead, Captain Dong Wu sent us a message. He said his people were ready to die, but they would not make it easy for us. What did he mean? Asked the tall alien. We found out when we tried to land on the asteroid, Vexter said. Every piece of equipment on that base had been turned into a weapon. The humans had taken their food makers and turned them into bombs. They took their medical machines and made them into guns that shot poison darts. She paused, remembering the horror of that day. But the worst part was not their weapons. It was their people. These were not soldiers. They were farmers, teachers, doctors, and engineers. But they fought like they had been warriors their whole lives. How could farmers fight trained soldiers? Asked a soldier with purple fur. Because humans do not separate their people into fighters and non-fighters like we do, Vexstar explained. Every human learns to fight. Men, women, children, old people. They all know how to use weapons and make plans for war. She lifted her metal arm. I lost this when a human female named Soyoung attacked our command post. She was a teacher before the war. She taught small children how to read and write. But when we invaded her asteroid, she became something else. The cantina was completely quiet now. Everyone was listening. Soyoung led a group of 20 humans against our main weapon storage. Vexstar continued. They were armed with kitchen knives, garden tools, and homemade bombs. My unit had the best armor and weapons in the galaxy. It should not have been a fight. She took a long drink before continuing. But Soyoung and her people did not fight like we expected. They used the tunnels under the base to move around without us seeing them. They set traps and ambushes. They attacked us from above and below at the same time. But you must have won eventually, said a young soldier. Yes, we won, Vexstar said, but the cost was terrible. Soyoung's group killed 60 of my warriors. Before we stopped them, and at the end, when Soyoung was cornered and wounded, she did something I will never forget. She looked around at all the faces, watching her. Soyoung was holding a bomb big enough to destroy our entire ammunition storage. I told her to put it down and surrender. I promised she would be treated well as a prisoner. What did she do? Whispered the purple-furred soldier. She smiled at me, Vexter said. The same kind of smile Captain Tejo had when he rammed our ship. Then she said something in her language that our translator turned into for the children, and she pressed the button. The explosion that followed killed Soyoung instantly. It also destroyed all our extra ammunition and half my battalion. As the flames spread around us, I could hear her laughing. Even as she died, she was happy because she had hurt us. Vexter stood up slowly. That was when I understood something terrible about humans. They do not fight to win battles. They fight to protect the people they love. And there is no force in the universe stronger than someone who fights for their family. She looked around the crowded cantina. The war went on for 5 more years after that. Every battle taught us the same lesson. Humans would rather die than let us hurt the people behind them. And they were very good at making their deaths count. As she limped away, the aliens sat in stunned silence, beginning to understand why the human war had been such a nightmare. The 4th night brought the largest crowd yet to the cantina. Word had spread throughout the station about Vexter's stories. Even high-ranking officers came to listen. Some sat at tables. Others stood against the walls. Everyone wanted to hear about the final battle that ended the human war. Vexter looked at all the faces around her. Young soldiers, old veterans, pilots, engineers, and even some civilians who worked on the station. Her red metal eye glowed as she began to speak. Tonight I will tell you about the day we learned that winning a war and surviving a war are 2 very different things, she said. The Battle of Terrace Gate, the last battle of the human war. A general with golden scales spoke from the back of the room. Commander, by the 7th year, surely the humans were beaten. They had lost every colony, every space station, every ship. Vexter nodded slowly. That is what High Command thought too. We had pushed the humans back to their home system. They had no allies, no fleet, no colonies left to defend. All they had was their blue planet and the will to keep fighting. She took a drink and continued. The Council decided to end the war with one final attack. Every ship we could gather. 300 warships from 50 different species. The largest fleet in galactic history, all focused on one small solar system. How could they possibly fight against 300 ships? Asked a young pilot. They could not, Vexter said, and they knew it. But humans do not surrender just because they cannot win. Their leader was a female named Misun. She was the daughter of Jihai, who had died in the 5th year of the war. Misun sent one message to our fleet as we approached their system. She paused, remembering those words. She said, "You want our world. Come and take it from our cold dead hands." The crowd murmured. Those words sounded familiar. Yes, Vextar said, hearing their whispers. The same words Captain Tejo had used 7 years earlier. Humans never learned new words for defiance. They just kept using the old ones. She gestured with her metal arm. What we found when we entered their system was not what we expected. The humans had not built a fleet to fight us. Instead, they had turned their entire solar system into a weapon. What do you mean? Asked the Golden Scale General. They had moved asteroids into the path of our ships, Vextar explained, hundreds of space rocks, each one filled with explosives. They had turned their moon into a giant gun platform. They had even weaponized their space junk, turning old satellites into guided missiles. She took another drink. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was the people. What about the people? Asked a young soldier. Misun had not evacuated the civilians to safety like most leaders would do, Vextar said. Instead, she had given every human in the system a job in the war. Children operated missile batteries. Old people flew suicide ships. Even their sick and wounded worked in communication centers and weapon factories. The cantina grew very quiet. The idea of children fighting in war disturbed many of the aliens listening. I was part of the assault team that tried to land on their moon, Vexter continued. The defenses there were run by humans, too young to be soldiers and too old to fight. But they fought anyway. She paused, her organic eye distant with memory. That is where I met Ji-Ho. He was guarding a supply depot that fed ammunition to the moon's weapons. He could not have been more than 12 years old by human standards. A child was guarding military supplies. Asked the general, sounding shocked. Not just guarding, Vexter said. When my unit approached, this boy Junho was carrying a plasma rifle bigger than he was. The weapon was so heavy he had to rest it on a metal stand to aim it. She touched the scars on her face. I told him to surrender. I said he was too young to die in a war. I promised that if he put down his weapon, we would not hurt him. What did he say? Whispered a young soldier. He pointed behind him to a shelter where his family was hiding. Vextar said, he told me his sister Yunji was in there, along with other children and their mothers. Then he said something I will never forget. The entire cantina waited for her words. He said, my sister is behind me, and you cannot have her. Not today, not ever. Then this child, this boy, who should have been playing games and learning to read, opened fire on my entire unit. Vexter stood up slowly. Junho held that position for 6 hours. 6 hours. A 12-year-old boy with one gun, fighting 30 trained warriors. He died when our explosives finally brought down the building he was defending. She looked around at all the shocked faces, but he gave his people 6 hours to evacuate. 6 hours for his sister and the other children to escape to the deeper shelters. A child died so other children could live a few more hours. That is when I knew we had lost, Vexter said quietly. Not the war. We could still destroy their planet. But we had lost something more important. We had lost the right to call ourselves civilized beings if we continued this fight. The cantina was completely silent as she limped toward the door. Tomorrow, she would tell them how the war ended, and why humans now sat as equals in the Galactic Council. On the 5th night, the cantina was so crowded that people stood outside the doors to listen. Vextar had to sit on a raised platform so everyone could see her. The station's commander was there, along with diplomats from 12 different species. Word of her stories had spread beyond just the military. Vextar looked out at the sea of faces, young and old, warriors and civilians, all waiting to hear how the greatest war in galactic history had ended. She held her cup with both hands, her metal fingers clicking softly against the ceramic. This is the last night I will tell these stories, she said. After tonight, I do not want to speak of the human war again. Some memories are too heavy to carry for long. The crowd grew completely silent. Even the bartender stopped washing glasses to listen. When I saw that boy Junho die defending his sister, something broke inside me. Vexter began. Not my body, my spirit. I had been a warrior for 40 years. I had fought in 20 different wars, but I had never seen anything like what humans would do for each other. She took a sip of her drink. That night, I sent a message to High Command. I told them what I had seen. A child fighting trained soldiers for 6 hours, just to buy time for other children to hide. I told them that if we continued this war, we would have to kill every human in the galaxy. A diplomat with silver skin raised her hand. Commander, surely High Command understood that victory was still possible. Victory, yes, Vexstar replied. We could have destroyed their planet. We had the weapons and the ships. But the cost would have been terrible. Not just for humans, but for us. She stood up slowly, using her metal legs to support her weight. High Command asked me for a report on how many humans would surrender if we destroyed their major cities. I told them the truth. None, not one human would surrender, even if we killed 90% of their people. How could you be so sure? Asked a young officer. Because I had fought them for 7 years, Vexter said. In every battle, in every defeat, humans never gave up. They never retreated unless they were covering the escape of civilians. They never surrendered unless they were unconscious or dead. She gestured to the crowd. Think about your own species. If an enemy destroyed half your world, how many of you would want to keep fighting? Most would seek peace to save the survivors. Many in the crowd nodded. That made sense. But humans are different, Vexter continued. The more we hurt them, the angrier they became. The more we killed, the harder the survivors fought. By the end of the war, we were not fighting an army. We were fighting an entire species that refused to quit. A general from the back of the room called out. So how did the war end? It ended with a conversation, Vexter said. Admiral Korduk, the same commander who had started the war, was still alive. He requested a meeting with the human leader Misun under a flag of truce. She paused, remembering that historic day. They met on a neutral station, much like this one. Misun came alone, with no guards, no weapons. She sat across from Admiral Korduk and asked him one simple question. The cantina was so quiet that people were holding their breath. She asked him, how many of your people are you willing to lose to defeat mine? Admiral Korduk said he was prepared to accept heavy casualties to win the war. Then Misun asked her second question. Vexstar looked around at all the listening faces. She asked, are you prepared to lose all of them? Because that is what it will take. We will never stop fighting. Never. You will have to kill every human alive, and we will make you pay for each death with 10 of your own people. What did the Admiral say? Whispered someone in the crowd. He asked Misun what humans wanted. Vexter replied. She told him humans wanted the same thing every species wants. The right to live free on their own world, to raise their children in peace, and to reach for the stars. She finished her drink and set the cup down. That is when Admiral Korduk realized the truth. We had started the war because we were afraid humans would become too powerful, but by fighting them, we had made them exactly what we feared. The war ended with a treaty, Vexstar continued. Humans would join the Galactic Council as full members, not as servants. They would help keep peace in the galaxy, but they would also be free to explore and grow as a species. A young soldier raised his hand. Are humans still dangerous? Vexter smiled, and for the first time in 5 nights, it was not a sad smile. Humans are now our allies. Their ambassador is a male named Sung Ho. He lost both legs in the war, but he works every day to prevent future conflicts. Their military advisor is a female called HFY. She was the one who figured out how to turn peaceful mining equipment into planet-destroying weapons. She looked around the packed cantina one last time. I will give you the same advice I give every young warrior. Humans are not our enemies anymore, but remember what they are capable of. They will die for strangers. They will sacrifice everything for their families. They will never surrender as long as someone they love is in danger. Vexstar limped slowly toward the exit. At the door, she turned back to face the crowd. And never forget this final lesson. There is no nightmare in this universe worse than a human who has nothing left to lose. But there is also no better friend than a human who has decided to trust you. The cantina remained silent long after she was gone, as hundreds of aliens thought about the species that had changed the galaxy forever.